should be out by the end of January. Actually, no, it will be out by the end of January. I will have that video done. I will have that figure made.
Are you sure?
You know what, let's aim for the 15th of January. So hello, I'm finally back doing the video that I said I'd be making about 3 or 4 months ago. I'm so sorry for the wait, but here he is. Obviously not here he is, here's the base figure that I'm going to be using. And I haven't recorded the full footage of, like, from this point to end point, because obviously I built him over the course of 8 months, and it was between moving houses multiple times and a whole load of other issues. So this is going to be more a case of me showing you what I started with, what I did to get to the final result, and I have found a way to make him better and easier. So I will be making another like V2 version of Ripjaws that will have the full build process in it. But starting off, this is the Jada Toys Creature of the Black Lagoon, and what I'm pointing out there is that his shoulders will be cut off, those shoulder pads. I'll be removing his feet and replacing them, taking those fins off, taking these fins off, and taking those ones off, and removing his fourth finger. I also end up sanding and filling a lot of his detailing to kind of smooth him out, but I'll get around to that later. And this is one of the other reasons I chose him, just very easy to separate the legs from the torso, which I thought would work well for Ripjaws, obviously having this big whole alternate piece of his legs changing for a tail. But now moving into Tinkercad, which is my go-to, which I am learning some more complicated softwares. For the time being this will do, and you can see I've done a very, very basic kind of shape for the tail. A cone with a ball at the top, a hole in for that joint, and then a flat, like half disc with a cut taken out of it for the fin at the bottom. And it's very basic, but it does also work fairly well. And this post here is the item that I'll use to make a hole for the armature wire that makes it posable. These three pieces are used to make the tail, that V shape is to make the cuts in him. But that's pretty much all there is to the tail really before we move into Blender. Here are the three parts for the head. So this is obviously the basic head shape that I mocked up in Tinkercad. Again, I do stuff very basic before chucking it into Blender and doing all the work there. You've got his teeth. This is how I did the teeth design. Literally just made one tooth and then duplicated it loads of times, edited it slightly so they're not all identical. And this is what I used to make the socket for the head. Again, very basic stuff, but it gets the job done and most of my work is done in Blender. Ignore those joints, those were for a separate project. And with that, that's kind of all of what I did in Tinkercad. Obviously you've got the 3 head bits, 3 tail bits, and then moving into Blender is where I do most of the work. You can see here, this is where things get a bit more complicated. There's a load of different segments, so I had to do a lot of Boolean differencing, and this was probably one of the more complicated things I've done in Blender, because I had to allocate each piece individually from one main piece, which isn't something I've really done before. And what I'm trying to show in there are the holes for the armature wire, but you can't see them very well from there. And obviously this is the detailing I added to that very basic flat piece. It's not a whole lot of detail, but then he doesn't really have a whole lot on his fin, so this is all that's really needed. And here you can see I'm showing you the individual segments for the black sections and for the green sections. And obviously it's a lot much more kind of smoothed out shape because it's Blender. Then moving on to the head, you can see this has changed an awful lot from Tinkercad. I spent quite a lot of time sculpting this, obviously adding the teeth in, getting the jaw to sit correctly, getting the eyes in the right place, and then that there is obviously the ball socket that I was talking about. So I use that as a Boolean difference to take the shape out of the head so that there's enough room for the socket to fit in and for there to be some articulation. Here's where things get really complicated, and I did the open mouth. And this one was quite a pain because he does have quite a detailed inner mouth. And obviously I've made up a few bits just to kind of keep angling the same, because when you've got drawings, they're obviously different per scene, so this is what I kind of pitched together from other bits. And then taking that away, I went and printed these on one of these 3 printers. I can't remember which one. I would think it was either the Mars 5 Ultra or the Mars 4 Ultra. It wouldn't have been a Saturn there, and I don't think it would have been my Mars 3 on the far left. I think it was one of these two here. But massive thank you to Elegoo, because these printers do a wonderful job of the prints, which you'll see now. These haven't had any sanding done to them really. You can see a slight layer issue there, which I think was my bad, because at the time I was still adjusting what was the printing room, and I knocked one of these prints while it was running, so that is entirely my bad. But you can see the smoothness of this print. It's not had any sanding except for where the kind of supports were, and I've just knocked them down a bit. And I've not knocked them down very much, just enough to not get in the way. This was printed in white, airbrushed with a greeny white, and then obviously the highlights done in green. Teeth painted yellow. Obviously the mouth's got different shades of green in there. The eyes have a black ring around them, plus what is a mix of purple, pink, white and silver to get the kind of shine you see in those eyes. And then here's the tail, so you can see with the armature wire in there. You do get gapping in between each of the segments. Unfortunately, unlike Accelerate, he's got a very geometric tail, whereas Accelerate is more rounded and just flat lines. The fact that he has these cuts and these V-shapes in it makes it very difficult to round those edges so that they kind of pass each other nicely. So if you straighten it out, you do end up with a big gap in between one of them. But obviously if you want to have his tail straight, you can spread those out a little bit more and have an equal gap between all the bits. But obviously spreading that out, you can see there, you get this much bend out of the tail. That's kind of your limit really. But you can get a bit of an S shape going on, so it looks a bit more natural. And then with the S shape, you can also bend it forwards and back, so you can get kind of using all axis of movement out of this. In regards to paint, I used high coat primer for any of the bits that are painted. This was printed in black resin, so only the black bits weren't painted. And then it's a mix of different airbrush colours, some of which were unbranded and came with my airbrush, so I don't know what colour they are. They were just like the green, yellow and blue that came with it. When I get around to making the actual custom, I will show you guys the full process of that, including what paints I use for it when I get around to it. So obviously I did cut those triangular shoulder pads off, removed the head, thinned a lot of him down and sanded a lot of the detail off. And what you can see here is that if I was to just stick the head on, you've got a massive gap, because Ripjaws has quite a long neck. So you're missing that bit there, which I use this white Milliput for, which means if there's any paint scratches, it goes through to white rather than like a different colour, which doesn't really make too much difference because obviously the base body is green. I should have used a white base body, which I'll get round to now. So for the next one, I'm going to be using this body, which is cheap, it's discounted everywhere, and it's an all white body, which is going to be perfect. It's just a base body. I'll be 3D printing the hands, the feet. I'm going to try and 3D scan him so I can print the neck piece as a separate part. The fins, the tail, I'm going to try and mould and cast the flaps for the front, so that this is a much easier kit for you guys to put together when I eventually get around to selling these parts on Etsy. Because this current Ripjaws took so much work, whereas this one, kind of rounding that neck out would be easier. I reckon I can do it in Blender as well and make it 3D printed part, so hopefully you guys don't have to do as much work. You can see here, it really would make more sense to use a white base body that's more Marvel Legends style already. Especially since I practically eradicated all the detail and brought it back to an almost Marvel Legends design anyway. Obviously rounding out those details on the fins, smoothing them out for the arms as well. No fins on the back of the calves or the thighs or his lower back anymore. Which you can see here how much I've changed it. I did keep the fins where I've added fins, just so the stability under the ones that I've kind of sculpted from Milliput. These are basic Marvel Legends feet. I think I took these from Speedball. Used a rotary tool to cut that pattern in and then put that webbing across, which I'm going to 3D model that and print it for the next one, so that in the kit that comes with it. Now you may be wondering what I mean about like moulding and casting his like skirt pieces. What I'll probably do is 3D model a flat piece, and then I will use the same material I think to make these, because this silk clay works really nicely. In a way that green stuff wouldn't, this silk clay has a lot of flex to it, You can also see I've left it brown on the inside because for whatever reason his detailing has like a grey, purpley brown internal structure. The black leaked a bit, but I'm not too bothered about that. Which means I don't have to worry about paint rub on the inside either, which is fantastic for this stuff. But obviously silk clay has that nice flexibility, and I did forget to mention that the forearms I've extended a lot as well, so I'm going to try and 3D print extensions for the forearms when I use the other body, rather than trying to mill apart extensions on there. But like I was saying about the silk clay, this stuff is very flexible, it's very easy to use, and if I were to 3D print a mould, I think I can just kind of roll sheets of this out, push it into the mould, cut them, and then package them with the kits when I get around to selling those. And that's just super glued on there, there's no other attachment, and it's super glued on top of paint, which I wouldn't recommend. I kind of did this in a bit of a rush to get it finished, but it's held up very well. I've put him in some strange poses, and it doesn't fall off when you stretch his legs. But now here he is with the tail on and that alternate head. And obviously you've got a bit of gapping where the fins don't align, but you can't keep those fins going unless you've got silicone running the entire way. I also think I should have added a bit of fin to the back of his head, just so it continued a bit more. But this makes him very long. This makes him a very, very big boy. He's not an easy one to display like this, which is another reason I think the other figure might work a little bit better, because it's a tiny bit smaller. And it leaves you with these pieces, which is, you know, another display option if you want to do that. So bringing him back in. This is the way I've got him displayed at the moment. Not on the same stand, on a different stand. He's slightly lower, just so he's not so imposing against the rest of my display. But yeah, this is how I'm going to be displaying him with the tail. I think it'd be a waste to have him just with his legs, although I'm very happy with how the legs came out. But putting him with the 7 that I've already got, you can see this set of 8 I'm very happy with. I think I've come up with some ways to make a few of them better, which I'll be doing for kits when I sell those again. But yeah, overall very happy, just missing Upgrade and Ghost Freak now, which I've got a plan for Ghost Freak, and I've got a very big plan for Upgrade. But I think I might do the new Ripjaws first. Let me know what you guys think, and I look forward to hearing your opinions. Thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for waiting, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which should be next week.